Hey guys, it's me, Kim. How are you doing? I'm great. Thank you so much for asking. I'm back with another video. Obviously, we're going to be talking about this elite college's bribery scandal. I have my biases, obviously, because I graduated from Harvard, but people have been asking me if I have thoughts on this, and yeah, I do. I have lots of thoughts, so let's get into them. So yesterday, the big breaking news was U.S. attorneys in Boston were charging 50 people in this big college bribery scam. So basically, rich folks paid to get their unimpressive, mediocre kids into elite universities by paying off coaches. They paid off SAT and ACT proctors. I mean, like, this was it was a ring. Really interesting, right? It's so interesting, the crimes that people choose to commit. A lot of us were introduced to the story via the famous people. Is that shade? The famous people that they pushed out into the front. So Lori Loughlin, who was on Full House and Fuller House. I guess I didn't watch Fuller House, but I assume she was on there because what else was she gonna do? And Felicity Huffman, who was on, a couple different TV shows. Also married to William H. Macy, whom I love. Who doesn't love him? Lori Loughlin paid $500,000 to make sure that her two daughters were crew recruits to USC. So we all know, if you've gone to college, you know that if you are an athletic recruit, the academic standards are significantly lower. So it's you have a much easier time of being admitted if you say that you play a sport. Lori decided that her little mediocre daughters were going to get into USC by pretending to be coxswains. So coxswains are the people who sit at the front of those little boats and shout out the directions or whatever. Honestly, I'm not 100% sure because I'm a black woman from Oklahoma. I did not even know what crew was until I went to college. So I really just had to figure it out. The scandal is they don't do that. They have never done any crew training. They've never been coxswains. It's a lie. And they went so far as to have her oldest daughter, whose name is Olivia Jade, who apparently has a huge YouTube following, she's legit YouTube famous. They had her pose on rowing machines to look like she was really in this sport. Like, it's next levels. The scam and the con was so layered. Okay, so then we have Felicity Huffman, who paid, a paltry $15,000 to pay off a proctor. So she had her daughter actually take an SAT or an ACT, can't remember which one, but they actually took the test. But then a proctor would come in after the test was complete and change the daughter's answers so that she could get a higher grade. Now, do you understand that means that you're recruiting not only the parent, you have to get a dirty proctor. The proctor has to know what's on the test or how to answer the questions. I understand why this would be a federal investigation. Maybe I don't understand why the feds would send 7 or 8 people to arrest. This is like a petty crime. Like, I don't know, the federal agents need to get some business because they are really into drawing guns on people who have not committed violent crimes, but that's another video, but that's a big deal. But there are lots of other people in this ring as well. Other people in this ring, pretending like their kids did polo and Photoshop their kids' faces onto actual polo players to really make it look like they were legit. There was another person who paid a Yale soccer coach $1.2 million to get her to be a Yale soccer recruit. Did not play the sport. Other people in this ring were falsifying their ethnicities so that they could take advantage of affirmative action. It's so horrifying, but also not at all surprising. I'm actually mostly surprised that they got busted. And the man who ran this college admissions ring and who made like $25 million in 8 years, he said that he'd worked with hundreds of families. So there are hundreds, literally it was like 750. So there are like 700 people out there who are very nervous right now. I said that this is not surprising because all this is the logical outcome of our society where higher education is a commodity, but it's an increasingly scarce commodity. For example, I applied to Harvard's class of 2011 back in 2007. At that time, the overall acceptance rate was 9%. If you apply to Harvard today as a senior, the acceptance rate is going to be like 4.5%. What we're seeing is in a little over a decade, the acceptance rate, which was already really low, has been halved, you guys. Like, how much lower can it go? Apparently, it's going to go much lower as we recognize that, like, a college degree is the new high school diploma. Like, that's just the base level thing that you need to have to enter the workforce. Another thing is, we do have to be open to alternative pathways. So everybody is not gonna go to college. We need to be open to people doing things with their hands and learning trades and being entrepreneurs and everything else. But it's quite fascinating to me that while we have Black folks like Killer Mike talking about y'all just need to learn a trade and whatever, you know what white people are saying? You know what rich people are saying? No, like, you need to go to college. You know, if college didn't matter, then why are rich white people so invested in getting their kids to go to college by any means necessary? If it didn't matter, why are they so invested in trying to keep other people out and making sure that their kids get in? College still matters, you guys. And even if you look at the numbers, life expectancy, annual salary, median wages, college matters. So yeah, I think we need to support the people who want to learn trades, support people who say that college just isn't for them. But we cannot be out here acting like formal higher education, like there's no place for that in our contemporary society. With these sorts of scandals we are seeing, that's not true. It matters to mobility, it matters to class status, it matters to wages. We still need college. I grew up either middle class or upper middle class, depending on who you talk to in Texas and Oklahoma. I knew I wanted to go to Harvard when I was in 7th grade. I worked all throughout middle school, all throughout high school to do it. I did the research on how to go to Harvard by myself. My parents were not involved. They would have been perfectly happy if I'd gone to OU or UT. Maybe my mom would have liked Spelman, but like they were not fixated on Ivy League or Stanford or University of Chicago or any of that. Like, it just wasn't about that for them. I was fixated on it because I was crazy competitive. Also, I was trying to get out. I had all my ducks in a row. I did the research, I sent out for the booklets. I knew what kind of SAT tests I needed to take. I learned about SAT 2 tests. I mean, like, I was in it. I'm fortunate because I have well-educated parents who are professionals. So despite the fact that they weren't, you know, tuned in to the world of elite college admissions, they still were like, well, you know, I trust you. You want to do this thing. I support it. So I was still able to do the test prep. I mean, I didn't do a formal like class, but by the books and all of that. I mean, class-wise, I was very lucky. But that's a different thing from like what super rich people do. I went to neighborhood public schools. Not until I went to college did I even know, like have any inkling of the fact that there is a completely different world for rich people. There are elite boarding schools that are basically feeder schools for Ivy Leagues. So those are the Choates, the Andovers, the Deerfields, even, you know, fancy private schools like Harvard Westlake in California, fancy private schools like those New York private schools like on Gossip Girl. I had no clue. Where I'm from, it was a humongous deal that I went to Harvard my year and another girl my year went to Yale. That was a humongous deal. It just is not the norm. And what I learned via exposure, and because a lot of my good friends went to those fancy private schools and fancy boarding schools, is the resources and the networks are just, it's on another level. So you get guidance, you get tutoring, you get test prep. I mean, you have to try to fail. If you're rich, doing well in school and getting into a good college is not about if you're smart or not. You don't have to be smart to turn in good work, to study for tests, to not be lazy. The problem with these people is their children were lazy. If they had just done a little bit of work in high school, they could have gotten good grades. Maybe not excellent grades, but grades good enough to go to UT. Are you kidding me? And what I think is so weird is your kid doesn't just become lazy overnight. If you are an engaged parent, a good parent at all, then you know what kind of student your kid is. You know what their trajectory is going to be. If they're lazy at 10, they're lazy at 14, they're lazy at 17, then you know that they're not gonna get the grades to go to USC or Harvard or Yale or Duke. You knew that. You knew that they weren't doing the SAT or the ACT test prep. So why at the last minute, after 4 years of high school, where you saw your kid be mediocre, you saw your kid not study for tests or not prepare for the SAT or ACT, why are you now deciding to spend all this money to swoop in and push them into a school that they don't deserve to be in? I don't get it. Or I guess I kind of do get it if you think of parents viewing children of an extension of themselves, of an extension of their brand and what they want to communicate to the world. So it's not even like even if you know that your kid is mediocre, they're not good at sports, they're not good at extracurriculars, they're not studying for tests, they're so unprepared that you can't even be honest with them. You can't even tell them, okay, babe, you're going to pretend to take the SAT, but what we're actually going to do is have somebody come in and take it for you. They're that mediocre. Another reason why I think that this is completely about the parents is Olivia Jade is the daughter of Lori Loughlin, and Olivia Jade is YouTube famous. She's making probably tens of thousands of dollars a month from YouTube, from being an influencer. You don't need this. Not only does she not need it financially to have a good life, but she's even said on her YouTube channel that she doesn't care about college. She doesn't care about going to class. She doesn't care about learning. She just wants to be in college and go to games. She's told us that. So why are you wasting her time and our time with this? What are you doing? If you still happen to believe in meritocracy, I really don't know what to tell you. We have so much data that proves that the United States is not that. We're now seeing with this huge case that rich parents have internalized this idea that their children cannot fail. That they will make sure that their children cannot fail. That their children can literally be horribly mediocre, poor students, not even interested in academia or going to school or going to college or learning, but they will not let them be anything less than like the picture perfect image of, you know, whatever they have in their mind. When I was growing up, I did internalize this idea of failure is not an option. But for me, as a black girl from Oklahoma with middle-class parents, my failure is not an option was, okay, so I'm just gonna do whatever it takes to achieve my goals. So I'm gonna stay up all night and I'm gonna study and I'm gonna retake the test. For these people, failure is not an option means, oh, you couldn't cut it? Well, we're going to bulldoze all of the obstacles and make sure you get what you want. I'm very proud of where I went to college. I'm a very proud Harvard College grad because it took me a lot of work to get there. It took me a lot of work to get through, but I do try to minimize it sometimes when I'm talking to people, because what I recognized after I went to college is most people are average. We're maybe slightly above average, but most people are not geniuses. I've maybe encountered a handful of geniuses, like super crazy smart people, but most people just had access to resources, they had support systems, and that cleared the path for them to be able to go to this amazing institution. I met smart athletes in college, and I met some dumb athletes in college. I met smart legacies in college, and I met some dumb legacies in college. Like, just because you get a Harvard diploma does not mean that you are brilliant. Thank God my alma mater did not get caught up in this scheme, but let's not forget that Jared Kushner's father, the ex-con by the way, the felon by the way, allegedly pledged $2.5 million to make sure that Jared Kushner was admitted. And that's why I believe deeply that education is not the solution to inequality. Education perpetuates inequality. It reproduces it. And that's why all this talk about affirmative action is so ridiculous if you understand how college admissions work. At elite universities, they use holistic review. So basically, they're looking at everything about you, all of your traits, and making a decision about whether or not to admit you. So they're looking at, are you an athlete? Are you a legacy? What's your ethnicity? What's your class background? What part of the country are you from? What's your gender? All of these things are taken into account. So to try to pick out race from holistic review, when we know that a superstar kid from Idaho probably has a leg up over a superstar kid from New York or from Boston, we know that to be true. But you're pinpointing race. Why? Because you're racist. We know that women and girls actually do better in school than boys. So you know what's happening during that holistic review process? Boys are getting a leg up in order to make sure that the gender balance is equal. What this bribery ring really does is take advantage of holistic review in order to further advantage the people who are already disproportionately advantaged in the system. We hear rich people talk about all the time, class warfare, don't be mad at me because I'm rich. But people are mad because we recognize that rich people are hoarding opportunities and resources to make sure that they cannot fail. They are doing all this stuff to make sure that they get the stuff that they did not earn, and that disadvantages the rest of us. I know that in our social justice utopia, we want to think that everybody's going to be able to win all the time, that a rising tide lifts all boats. It's not possible. Some people have to lose, particularly in the context of college admissions where there's a finite number of spaces. Some people are going to have to be excluded. We have to make a decision about who we want that to be. Do we want a college full of mediocre rich people? No, we don't. Do we want a college full of women or a college full of white people? No, we don't. Even if we don't talk about college admissions, because that's pretty narrow. Let's talk about class mobility, right? So even if our aim is to make it possible for people at the bottom to rise to the top, right? The bottom 20% to rise to the top 20%. That means that some people who are currently in the top 20% are going to have to come down because everybody cannot be in the top 20%. That's how numbers work. But rich people, people in the top 20%, do not want that. People want to be able to pass down their privilege, their networks, their earning potential. And I get that because you want the best for your children. You want to make sure that they're set up for a good life, but they didn't earn it. What I have learned in these 12 years since I was a freshman at Harvard is where you go to school does matter. Where you go to college does matter. Maybe this is only applicable to like elite institutions, but I've absolutely seen it in my life. People assume a lot about me because of where I went to college. They make note of it. They say it to me quite frequently, that they assume me to be capable and intelligent because of where I went to college. And that is a privilege that most black people, most black women do not have. The assumption that I am capable and intelligent means that people will give me a second look sometimes. They will give me certain opportunities. They'll invite me into certain rooms and into certain conversations. That affects the outcome of your life. But again, that stuff is not actually about my real capabilities, right? It is about what is telegraphed from the brand that I'm associated with. And being able to be associated with that brand is not about being smart. And we even saw that in that big scandal with that Louisiana prep school. I think it was called TM Landry, where basically the kids weren't going to class, they weren't learning anything, but the heads of those schools learned how to trick and finesse elite college admissions by telling their kids to sell them these kind of sob poverty porn stories. And we're supposed to be mad at them for that? No, because they rigged the system just like the rich white folks rigged the system. They did it in their own way. We should be ashamed that in this country, people, particularly black people, particularly black women, go to prison for stealing public education by using a friend's address or a relative's address to send their kids to good schools. And they do that because we recognize that the quality of your education dictates the outcome of your life. Lori Loughlin's daughter, Olivia Jade, probably makes mid-six figures a year. She already told us she don't even like going to class. She doesn't care about learning. You don't need this. In conclusion, yes, college admissions is a scam. No, I'm not surprised. I do not expect any of these people to go to prison except for that one ringleader. Like, he probably going to jail. He probably going to jail. But the rest of these, those, thin white women, They're not gonna see any prison time. And you know, that's America. I do believe that as minorities, as marginalized folks, that we can tell people, look, all this stuff is rigged, it's all a scam, but also the consequences of being mediocre in a society where stuff is already rigged against you are enormous. So I still encourage people to do their best, to do your work, do what you can, right? There's so much stuff that's outside of your control. Just do what you can. So that's all I have to say about that. Thank you guys so much for watching. Over on Patreon, I did a companion video where for so long people have been asking me to talk about the pros and cons of my Harvard experience. I finally got into it over there, so go ahead and check that out. Obviously, it's patrons only, so sign up on patreon.com/forharriet. Send me an email, leave a comment, find a way to private message me. I'm not gonna tell you how, but find that way to do it. Buy some merch, sign up for the email newsletter. I will see you next time. Bye guys.